the environmental stress, avoid some of the stresses in the field, and that really lets me break that down. And it keeps, the other thing it does is, you know, if I've got a third of my acres in a product, I get a good idea if it works or not. You know, and that's the other thing too, is sometimes I see guys testing products and they want to start so slowly on testing something new that they don't get a good read on it. You know, so don't be afraid to test new stuff. Just break it up across your acres. Some of the key factors for you to take in as you're doing your planning and basically looking at what your hybrid selection is going to be from year to year. How much risk am I willing to take with my hybrid selection? You know, and that goes back to that rule of thirds. You know, so yes, I may have a brand new hybrid that I've never seen before. But at least a third of my acres are going to be in my standard favorite hybrid that I've used for the last several years, and then I've got another third of those acres that I can put in another hybrid I have experience with. So I don't have to overload my farm with new hybrids, but at the same time I don't want to be stuck on all the same genetics every year. How much do I know about my soil? Do I know enough to be field specific? Make sure make sure you have as much information as possible on your fields before you start making your selections. That will help you to basically to place those hybrids in the right locations. Am I planting every hybrid in every field the same? Now this kind of gets into some of the planting population topics. You know, so I may be farming. I may have one field that has great water holding capacity, great fertility. One of those types of fields that I can keep my populations a little bit higher maybe. But then at the same time I may be farming something that's really gravelly, that has very low moisture holding capacity. I'm a lot better off planting that hybrid at a lower population, even though it's maybe the same hybrid I'm using on two different fields. Make sure that we're matching that planting population to the field and to that hybrid as well. Making sure, we hit on this earlier, but make sure you're matching your workhorse and racehorse hybrids to the right acres. Now that's some old industry terminology that gets thrown around a lot. Basically what we're talking about here, workhorse hybrids are those consistent performers that I can put them on stress ground and I'm going to get a good yield out of them. Those racehorse hybrids have real high-end potential, but sometimes we put those on stressful ground and they fall apart. Now, when you look at our lineup, that emphasis really is kind of on that workhorse style hybrid. We definitely have hybrids that have top end yield, but so many of our end users need workhorse hybrids across their acres. That's a big emphasis, is making sure that our yield floor stays up on those hybrids. And there again, what's my end use of each acre? Making sure I'm matching the right hybrid for the end use. Looking at my fertility plan, you know, and this is, you know, for me, it's not even as much about a hybrid specific thing as a field specific. So I'm trying to match my fertility plan with the field. So not every field is created the same, so we want to make sure that we are being efficient and matching our fertility plan with that acre. And setting down as you're making your plan and coming up with what are my 3 goals. So what I want to focus on is it all about yield for me? Is it all about quality? Is it somewhere in between? You know, what do I want to accomplish with my corn crop? And not just your corn crop, but you can apply that to a lot of the operations on your farm. But setting up some of those goals early in the season can put you ahead. Then make sure your selections match those goals. I want to look at this really quickly. So I want to look at planting population and how that affects quality. So we talked about fiber digestibility and the key role that plays in driving milk components. Now this is a population study that we did, actually did this in Wisconsin. And what we're looking at is we've got two hybrids here and looking at them across several different planting populations. Now when we look at, so these are color coded, so when we look at the, make sure I got this right. When we look here, these brown bars, these are the 5250 hybrid. The green bars are the 527. And when we look at that, so the left side will be the left bar will be the yield, the right bar will be your quality. So one of the things that we see when we look at these studies is that every time that we increase planting population, kind of our general trend until we kind of break the threshold way out here on really high pops. Every time we increase that, we increase our yield. And that is where our industry is focused. Industry is focused on, how many plants per acre can we put out there to drive that yield? And we're seeing that in the Midwest where, planting populations for corn silage now are 34, 36, 38,000 on most of our acres. The problem comes in, every time we do that, we reduce the quality. So there is a price to be paid for some of that yield. And there it goes back to what are the goals for our farm. So the key for us is looking at where do we see that intersection. So where do we maximize yield and quality both? And there again, it depends. Am I so dependent on feed stuff that I need to stay somewhere out here on the right side of this circle? Or is the quality more of a factor for me and I want to drive components and I want to focus over here more on the left side of this circle? But, and this is a very repeatable study. This is something that's been done over and over again. Penn State's done this study, University of Wisconsin. We did this internally. We've done it twice now. The same results on both studies. I've got some other slides here that'll show you when we backed it up the following year, but basically you're going to see the exact same thing. You're going to see, so the most immediate thing you see affected within the quality, fiber. So anytime we reduce our planting population, we're going to increase the fiber digestibility. Anytime we crowd those plants, we make smaller plants, we get lower fiber digestibility. I was really surprised that we did see similar results on starch as well. So anytime we crowded the plants, we had lower starch digestibility. Just to give you kind of some real world application on some of this, I had two different instances in the Midwest this year where we had large farms that had our corn hybrids out, had other corn companies' hybrids out, and we had a really bad spring. So we had extreme, we got in early, everything was great, and then all of a sudden comes the cold, wet weather. And we lost a lot of plant stands. It wasn't just restricted to Master's Choice corn, it was everybody. Lots and lots of replant acres. I had two different farms that were dealing with this, and they're calling us, trying to figure out what do we do, and the dealers are out working with them. They finally decided that because it was so wet for so long, it took them so long, would have been so late for them to get back in and replant. They decided they were better off to leave the crop as it was. They were stressed out all year, and this was a situation where we had custom growers growing for specific dairies. So the dairyman wasn't necessarily in control of the acres. And in both of those cases, we lost about 10% of our overall planting pop, maybe 12% in places, and extremely low planting pops based on what is the norm. And we had growers who were panicked because they didn't think they were going to have enough yield. They didn't think they were going to meet their quotas for the dairy. And when we got to the end of the season, those Master's Choice hybrids where they were using flex hybrids, and that was a key part of that. Those flex hybrids, they yielded right with their normal yield with a reduced population, and the quality they harvested this year is the best they've ever had. We were talking on the way out here. One of those farms here in the last couple of weeks has just moved into feeding that corn silage, and its production has jumped immediately. They are seeing the benefit of that lower population now. It's not the way they really intended to learn that, but through that tough spring, that reduced planting population, we saw a great increase in quality, and we still saw competitive yields because we had flex hybrids that could overcome some of that lower population. So that's one of those key things that I think that every dairyman should understand is the effect of planting population on their quality. And like I say, fiber is probably the most heavily affected that, which is a key factor for our components. I know I'm running short on time here, so I'm going to skip a couple of these here, and I will just briefly summarize what we're doing right now at Master's Choice. And you're going to see us talking about our MPG hybrid index. You may remember the old MPG symbol being in our hybrid guidebooks over the years. It stands for milk production genetics. And this is a selection process that we've developed over the years. And basically what we do is we take in a bunch, 30 plus layers of different testing. Some of it's commercial testing, some of it's proprietary, because there is no one test out there that gives us accurate data on how a corn hybrid is going to feed. And there's no one lab, no one test. So what we've had to do is pull all of our resources together to build one tool that allows us to select hybrids. And it's a similar system that we've been using for the last few years, but we actually finally sat down and quantified it. So we made it a lot less subjective. And what it allows us to do, I can take corn silage samples, look at those numbers, and I can get a firm number on how those two compare to each other, get an idea of which one's going to make more milk than the other. So we started down that path a little over a year ago. Last year we did a feeding study in Wisconsin, and basically what we did was we had 5 different corn silages. We indexed, put an MPG index score on all of those, and when we ran it through the feeding study, we saw a direct correlation. So what we wound up with was the corn silages that tested the lowest on the index fed the very worst. The ones that tested the best were our highest milk producers, which was exactly what we wanted to see. We wanted to see something that we could basically run a lab test and get a direct correlation to milk production. And that's something for us that's a huge tool as a selection process, because it allows me to take hundreds of samples in and quickly move through them and decide which ones are my best performers and which ones are the ones that are going to fall through the cracks. The other thing that it's going to do is for our producers, for our customers, you're going to be able to purchase products that have been tested for milk production before they make it to the marketplace. They are developed specifically for that, and they're going to be a selection tool for your dealer. They will be able to come to the farm and talk with you about matching the right hybrid to the right acre. So that becomes a key piece of that. In understanding what kind of quality potential that we can harvest out of that particular corn hybrid. So that's something you'll see from us. You'll see that more in our hybrid guides kind of in the future. We'll be running with that more and more on some of our marketing as well. But you will see a lot of that in the future. And also too, and I'm not going to make it all the way through, but if you guys spend any time on YouTube, look up our Master's Choice YouTube channel. You'll see videos on there talking about our MPG index, our selection process, all kinds of behind the scenes stuff kind of on what's going on at Master's Choice. But just trying to develop content and tools for the customers and dealers. So that'll be a kind of a key place for you guys to find some of that stuff. So I know I'm running out of time. I'll take any questions. You guys have anything here as we transition? Yes.
What should I be thinking about BMR hybrids? Are they consideration for my milk output?
Sure. So the question is, what should we be considering about BMR when we're looking at BMR corn hybrids? So BMR corn hybrids feed exceptionally well. There is no doubt about that. That fiber digestibility will give you the opportunity to produce a lot of milk and drive components. The key differences that you have to weigh out there between a conventional corn hybrid and a BMR really come into the agronomic side of it. So My yields on a BMR crop tend to be lower. My losses are higher in the field versus what I get out of a conventional corn hybrid. My dry matter intake is also going to be higher because I have to feed more. So basically, and if you look at the data from, so I think Cornell's done a lot of work there. If you look at their work, you probably need about 25% more acres of BMR corn versus what you do of a standard corn hybrid. So it really comes down to what's your land base like and what are your goals. And it is a great tool, feeds really well. One of the things to take into consideration too on the BMRs, they tend to have very hard grain, very poor starch digestibility. So despite the high fiber, they're very poor in starch. So what a lot of guys have been doing, especially if they're limited on some of their land base, is they use a floury grain as kind of as their feed first option. So they'll start feeding that in the fall, give that BMR time to ferment, and then start in feeding that BMR after it's had fermentation time. So those two work together as a pretty good tool. Yes?
There's a Healthy Herd Genetics line out there that they talk about a floury improvement in flower digestibility on the opaque gene, floury acid, and what is your explanation for your flowery variety?
So the question kind of asking about what Healthy Herd Genetics is doing with they're using a leafy floury versus what Master's Choice is doing from a floury grain standpoint. So there are a number of different endosperm types out there, different floury genes, and then we even have a lot of genes that affect starch type that outside of whether it's a floury or a dent. For us, we're utilizing traits that are dominant traits. So when you look at a leafy floury, for example, typically you only see about 25% of the kernels are actually floury kernels. You'll see the same consistency across all of the entire ear for us. And we're not working. I'm not working with floury or with with leafies. For us, we've been more successful in delivering quality without the leafy gene. I don't see much yield increase, and I see a little better quality with conventional corn hybrids versus the leafy flouries. I think for us, it's a more diverse genetic base than what's coming on some of the leafy flouries, and it's a full lineup. So I'm able to go as low as 75-day hybrids all the way up to 117-day that are all carrying improved starch digestibility as opposed to being kind of stuck in one specific place. All right, we'll wrap it up. Thank you, guys.
Thank you, Kevin.